Donald Trump's long-standing relationship with Boeing has certainly had more than its share of turbulence, if you will, over the years. But things may have just gotten a little bit bumpier today, according to a new...
What if I told you a CEO just stood up to Donald Trump and didn't back down? Boeing, one of America's biggest giants, made a move that sent shockwaves through the White House, shifting production to Mexico. Trump? He hit back with a brutal 200% tariff threat. But instead of folding, Boeing's CEO went public and fired back. What followed was a corporate versus political showdown, unlike anything we've seen. This isn't just about planes. This is about power, patriotism, and the billion-dollar battle that could reshape America's economy. Let's dive into the story they don't want you to hear. 1. Boeing and Trump. Donald Trump and Boeing have never been a smooth flight. While both sides initially seemed to be on the same page of patriotic economic objectives, shoring up American industry, saving jobs, and improving global competitiveness, Boeing, as an international aerospace giant, is driven by a business model based on global supply chains, cost containment, and global market integration. Trump, however, has been a staunch defender of protectionism at all times, believing that what is made locally is the pillar of American power. This divergence reached its climax when Boeing explored moving part of its manufacturing to Mexico. To Trump, however, this was an unacceptable outsourcing of American jobs. Trump retaliated in kind, a threat of a devastating 200% tariff on Boeing aircraft if the move went ahead. What ensued wasn't merely a conflict of interests, but an emblem of a deeper ideological divide that characterizes our times: globalism and nationalism, pragmatism and populism, corporate strategy and political dogma. The situation became more and more charged as the media picked up on the narrative, spinning it as a high-stakes clash between corporate independence and executive power. The executives at Boeing found themselves under the glare of the spotlight, having to justify their model of business not only in boardrooms but also in the public and political spheres. And at the center of it all was a CEO willing to fight to save his company's future, even if it meant taking on the most powerful political leader in the nation. 2. The tariff threat. When Trump threatened the 200% tariff, it put corporate America in a tizzy. This wasn't politics posturing. It was an overt affront to one of the most powerful firms in America. Raising the price of Boeing jets exponentially was merely one of its implications. A move like that would quite literally devastate the firm's capability to compete overseas. For Boeing, selling to airlines and governments around the globe, price sensitivity is everything. The tariff wasn't merely a nuisance, it was a threat to the company's very existence. But Trump's math was different. The tariff was a lever, a way to pressure Boeing and other companies to put American workers and domestic manufacturing first. It was a message to all CEOs in America that offshoring would not be tolerated. Politically, it was a gutsy move, a show of force and a reaffirmation of the America First creed. But from a financial point of view, the strategy was risky. If firms such as Boeing were to charge consumers those tariffs, or move even more production abroad to evade them, it could backfire spectacularly. Boeing's CEO acted quickly and with resolute determination. He did not merely rebuff the tariff threat with policy reasoning, he framed the company's decisions in the context of contemporary business realities. He contended that prosperity in today's economy calls for flexibility, international alliances, and access to global talent, none of which can be maintained through isolationist policies. It was a blunt and public denunciation of the administration, and it cast the issue not as one of patriotism or greed, but of reality versus rhetoric. 3rd, strategic manufacturing. To outsiders, Boeing's interest in Mexico might seem to be all about saving on labor costs. But the move was based on much more sophisticated strategic thinking. Aerospace production is one of the most complex and capital-intensive processes on the planet. Each component, each node in the supply chain, and each logistical factor is critical to the final product's cost, quality, and delivery schedule. Mexico provides proximity to America, but access to an increasing pool of experienced labor and well-established supplier bases. It's not abandoning America. It's all about operating more efficiently in the hyper-competitive market. Boeing leadership contended that such diversification is essential to stay ahead of the competition, particularly in view of international competitors who are fast forging ahead themselves with global supply chains. In reality, the choice of going abroad to expand wasn't an ideological consideration, but rather a survival question. Firms such as Boeing have to go on adjusting and adapting to business conditions, consumers' demands, and geopolitical context. The explanation by the CEO for the maneuver was not an appeal for sovereignty. It was a rebuff to the thinking that economic vigor is derived merely from home strength. Rather, he laid out a vision for American competitiveness based on flexibility, innovation, and international cooperation, a far cry from the zero-sum world of punitive tariffs and rigid national borders. 4. Protectionism versus pragmatism. The battle between Boeing and Trump revealed an underlying philosophical split. One side had the protectionist spirit of economic nationalism: home the jobs, lower the imports, penalize firms that outsource. The opposing side had the realistic nature of international trade: plan for expansion, take advantage of comparative strengths, and be efficient in an integrated world. Trump's perception of national interest was rooted in a nostalgia for the past, when manufacturing was the foundation of American wealth. Under such circumstances, any step to outsource production overseas, even to some extent, was betrayal. However, for contemporary corporations, the world is different. The instruments of economic success now comprise international partnerships, offshore innovation centers, and intricate cross-border operations. This split is not merely academic, it carries real-world implications. If firms are compelled to function in artificial boundaries defined by political ideology, they stand to lose their competitive advantage. Alternatively, if they choose to disregard the societal effects of globalization, they run the risk of alienating policymakers as well as the general public. Boeing's CEO was taking a calculated gamble to defend his approach in the public forum, but it was a gamble he was forced to take. The future of American industry, he seemed to contend, rests not in withdrawal from the world, but in shaping it. 5. The fallout. One of the most immediate concerns raised by the potential tariff was job security. The very policy that was designed to safeguard American workers threatened to upset the very environment that sustains them. Boeing's business employs thousands of jobs, not only on the assembly line, but within a vast network of suppliers, logistics companies, engineers, and maintenance businesses. The tariff, if implemented, would have increased the cost of production considerably, compelling Boeing to rethink its entire business model. Layoffs, restructuring, and even possible loss of contracts would ensue. Furthermore, increased prices for aircraft would cascade throughout the airline industry, resulting in higher ticket prices and lower demand for new jets. More, international allies would retaliate. Trade wars tend to be a two-way street. If the US penalizes American companies for their global involvement, other nations are likely to follow suit, opening up a realm of uncertainty that discourages investment and inhibits growth. The CEO of Boeing pointed out this risk, threatening that short-term political victories may cause long-term economic harm. By doing so, he set the discussion not in terms of ideology, but in terms of sustainability, a vision that strongly appealed to investors, economists, and world industry leaders. 6. Corporate independence. Boeing's CEO did not sugarcoat his response to the administration's threats, respecting national interests, but firm in tone. Boeing's business is informed by economic analysis, not political bullying. In corporate America, open disobedience of presidential policy is uncommon, especially from a company as closely embedded with defense contracts and government collaboration. But this was not about Boeing. It was about the larger issue of corporate independence. His words, "This isn't going to be fixed in one fell swoop," were more than company jargon. They were an explicit recognition that America's manufacturing woes are complex and cannot be resolved with roughshod policies such as tariffs. Boeing leadership signaled clearly they would not compromise global strategy for political cover. Rather, they demanded level-headed debate, thinking long-term and first and foremost, freedom from economically reactionary dictates. That message echoed well beyond the aerospace world. Tech, pharmaceutical, and auto business leaders voiced similar sentiments. Many viewed Boeing's position as a necessary statement of business sense in an environment growing more populist by the day. By standing firm, the CEO framed Boeing not merely as a company defending a factory location, but as a company defending the fundamentals of modern economic decision-making. In doing so, he might have sparked a larger movement among American firms to take matters into their own hands. 7. Trade wars and the global chessboard. The impact of Trump's suggested tariff didn't stop at US borders. Trade policies in a single country within an interdependent global economy have the potential to create a ripple effect worldwide. If the 200% tariff had been implemented, foreign partners might have perceived it as economic aggression, particularly if it would punish a company for making lawful and strategic decisions outside the United States. Doing so could have initiated retaliatory tariffs on American exports, which would harm various industries. This economic brinksmanship is especially dangerous in industries such as aerospace, where contracts, alliances, and supply chains crisscross continents. Boeing's production reaches Europe, Asia, Latin America, and North America. Injecting volatility into this system doesn't affect just planes. It affects parts makers in Ohio, titanium suppliers in Japan, design teams in India, and purchasers in South America. Boeing leadership recognized the brittleness of these relationships. Their message, messing with the delicate balance of international trade, incurs costs extending far beyond an individual election season or political victory. Free trade agreements and symbiotic economic policy aren't pipe dreams. They're the cornerstone upon which businesses like Boeing are able to operate. Disrupting that arrangement could establish a perilous precedent, one whereby fear politics chips away at 4 decades of economic advancement and worldwide cooperation. 8. The politics of perception and the power of narrative. In politics, image can have a greater impact than policy. When former President Donald Trump spoke out against Boeing's contemplation of relocating some operations to Mexico, it wasn't merely a business critique. It was a framing tactic. Painting the company's action as an abandonment of US workers, he hit a nerve in a community already anxious due to decades of job offshoring and deindustrialization. The rhetoric was compelling. Save American industry no matter what the cost, even if it cost economic isolation. But behind the message was more policy. It was strategy. Threats of a 200% tariff were framed as a badge of defiance, resonating with a base craving powerful, firm action. It was a calculated political message delivered under the guise of an economic decree, validating Trump's overall project of economic nationalism and setting up the manufacturing issue in the heart of American identity. Boeing, not so quietly, was not going to be positioned as the villain. The firm reacted not in terms of insubordination, but of explanation, presenting its actions as one of global competitiveness rather than betrayal. It spoke of any international move as not a retreat, but a reprioritization, a venture to stay nimble in a business where cost-effectiveness, access to significant markets, and availability of talent dictates survival. Boeing repositioned itself not as deserting America, but evolving to serve it more. This clash of tales unfolded on the big news channels, social media platforms, and political realms. Trump's message appealed to those who wanted a return to American industrial supremacy at home. Boeing's retort appealed to economists corporate executives, and international strategists who grasped the realities of contemporary manufacture. Trump's critics cautioned that such combative populist language threatened to provoke economic retaliation from trading partners and destabilize global supply chains, consequences that could rebound against American industries and workers. In the meantime, Boeing CEO Muilenburg quietly reframed the debate, demonstrating that genuine leadership in the 21st century takes more than patriotic rhetoric. It takes strategic vision and a realistic grasp of global markets. Finally, this wasn't merely a policy conflict, it was war over ideologies. One side was a political movement working to safeguard American employment via tariffs and corporate lobbying. The other was a global business, acting on market rationale and long-term sustainability. Boeing's story didn't merely justify a business move, it broadened the national conversation, inquiring what it truly means to be an American business in a borderless world. 9. Lessons from the edge. As the dust clears from the battle between Boeing and the previous president, one thing is certain. Corporate executives can no longer remain quiet in the face of political pressure. The response of the Boeing CEO was not only daring, it was a rewriting of what corporate leadership in a polarized age and era of public scrutiny looks like. CEOs are now required not just to oversee profits, but also to stand up for their company's values, strategies, and global relevance. This episode sent a strong message to the business world. Defending long-term strategy might mean defending against political power. Boeing's determination not to give in to the pressure of a tariff threat became a study in staying power. Investors noticed, international allies noticed, employees noticed, and most importantly, so did other CEOs. The Boeing crisis is perhaps only the start of a wider transformation of American business culture. As world markets continue to shift and political climates become more unstable, CEOs need to be ready to weigh in, not on economics per se, but on the societal issues that drive them. Transparency, bravery, and flexibility are becoming as critical as profit lines and product pipelines. Whether you see the CEO's position as heroic or rebellious, it was definitely a turning point. It re-established the role of business as a voice in national discussion, rather than as a silent witness. And it emphasized a profound truth. In the world today, the boardroom and Oval Office are closer than they once were. How that reality is managed will decide the success of not only Boeing, but of American industry in general. Pattam Puing Vakil, Trump. The Boeing-Trump conflict will be examined for decades, not simply as a standalone corporate scandal, but as a turning point in America's continuing economic transformation. It displayed the weakness of political muscle when countered by the sophistication of contemporary industry, and demonstrated the increasing position of CEOs as not only business masters, but global planners and national players. What comes next is unclear. Will future governments adopt cooperation over conflict? Will corporations shift out of fear or double down on international integration? One thing is certain. This was not merely a fight between a president and a corporation. It was a turning point for the future direction of the country's economic identity. Boeing's CEO may have dropped a bombshell on Trump, but the shockwave reverberated across every corner of the political and business world. It's a wake-up call, a challenge, and maybe a turning point. If you enjoyed this article, let us hear your opinion in the comments below. We really appreciate your input in this discussion. And as always, thank you for watching and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, stay educated, stay reflective, and stay curious.